My name is Carol Peters, and I'm proud to serve as the president and CEO of United Way Next. I am a former United Way professional. I worked in McHenry County, Illinois for 5 years as a CEO. And I remember that our United Way was always thinking about planned giving. And we really never got there under my leadership, mainly because we were so busy with so many other things. But today, my hope is by you being here just shows that you're invested in this area of work. You're thinking about it, you're considering it, and you're wondering kind of what's next for your local United Way. And so I am so excited to introduce you to the volunteers who really make this happen through United Way Next. And I will let them introduce themselves. But I'm going to start with our facilitator for today, Dan Dunne. So Dan, take it away.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you, Caitlin, for working and preparing this session. And especially we want to thank Monica and Ed for being our presenters today. I want to say thanks to you, local staff of United Way, for the work you do each day to advance the mission of United Way. I was fortunate to be hired by United Way some many years ago, and I served in 4 different United Ways, in Jacksonville, Florida, in 2 cities in North Carolina, and then spent 23 years with the United Way of Central Alabama in Birmingham, Alabama, and there was fortunate to start the endowment or planned giving program, and they're in $100 million campaign now. We started out with just a couple of trust funds in local banks and started just visiting people and friendly visiting. And they'll exceed that $100 million when they're finished the campaign. But it's an exciting venture. And I've fortunate to be able to look back and see the success that we've had in Birmingham from very small beginnings. The work, of course, is to perpetuate annual giving. The challenge always is to grow the annual giving, but we want to perpetuate the good work that our many donors do, and planned giving and endowment is a wonderful way to advance the mission of United Way, allow people to continue their good work into future generations. It takes about 25 times the annual gift to perpetuate the gift, so that it's purchasing power and so forth. We are very grateful to Monica Estabrooke and Ed John, who taught me a lot as I journeyed through United Way, and they're still teaching me. And we are so fortunate that they have taken time to prepare this presentation. And I will ask them to spend a few minutes just telling us about who they are and what they have done to advance the mission of United Way nationwide and worldwide too in their careers. Ed or Monica, whichever one wants to introduce yourself.
You, Monica.
Okay. I currently live in Fairfax, Virginia. After spending 30 years at IBM as an organization manager, I was convinced by a local United Way president to come and join them in a rather small United Way as a director of planned giving. And I was there about 5 years, and United Way of America, Ed John, called me down to help with tools and resources for United Ways across the country. I retired 3 times, and I'm still working, and I work for a church right now. And interestingly enough, I do donor relationships with individuals that have made commitments to us to be sure that we have touch points, and I thank them. Here, for plan giving, and I also volunteer for AARP because I was with them for 7 years as well doing plan giving. So I have a lot of varied experiences in different non-for-profit organizations, and it's really helped me help others.
Great, Monica, thank you so much.
Mhm.
Well,
Ed?
I'm Ed John, and I have worked for 3 local United Ways. I've worked with United Way in Salt Lake City and Denver and Charlotte, but I spent about a little over 20 years at United Way of America and then worldwide, and I was the vice president of plan giving and endowments. And then when I retired, my wife and I had a consulting firm for about 7 or 8 years focusing on major gifts and plan giving. And I live in the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I just relinquished my license, but I was a certified financial planner. So I had some technical expertise to bring to this job. So that's a little background on me. And Dan, do you want us to just jump right in and get going?
Please, please.
Caitlin, if we could have the first slide. I want the name of this is Reaching This Simplicity Beyond the Complexity of Plan Giving. And I chose that, and Monica and I chose that because early on in my career, many, many years ago, I went to someone in our city who had a strong reputation in plan giving, was very effective. And I asked her, what really is the secret to being successful in plan giving? And she said, you need to reach beyond the complexity and embrace the simplicity of plan giving. And I smiled, but inside I said, what the hell does that mean? But it took me about 2 years to figure it out. And once I did, it dramatically changed things for me and my relationships with donors. And I know Monica and I, as we talked about this seminar, felt the same. So we're going to go through that today, but we want to learn a little about you who are on this office hours. So we have a couple of poll questions. And Caitlin, if you could pull up the first one. We're interested in knowing a little bit about what you do at your United Ways. So if you could take just a few minutes and answer this question. And then Caitlin, if you can let me know when we have some answers. Okay.
Ooh,
Based on this, what do you think, Monica?
wow. I'm pleased to see some CEOs in there.
Yeah, but it looks like the majority are the research development staff with
Yep.
some major gift. There are no plan giving staff, and that's interesting. And then CEOs. Okay, that's great. Let's take a look at the next polling question. What is the status of your plan giving program? And we're always curious about this. So you just take a minute. Okay, it looks like just getting started or revamping. Any thoughts on this, Monica? It's kind of what we expected, wasn't it?
Yes, Yes, what's the other?
I guess none of the above. I
Okay.
don't know what that would mean.
Mhm.
Okay. And I think what we'd like to do is just one more, and this is helpful to us and hopefully helpful to all of you to get a context of those who are involved. So Caitlin, if you could pull up one more. What is the biggest barrier to your plan giving program? Knowing where to start,
And not enough staff.
not enough
Yeah.
staff.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's helpful to us. And I think what I'd like to do is, Caitlin, let's go on to the next slide. Like any good session, we have established some objectives. And the objectives we've established here are understand the importance of gaining CEO and board leadership support. Number 2, how to identify your best plan giving prospects. And number 3, learn ways to begin the plan giving conversation. So those are the objectives that we set in terms of crafting this presentation. And Caitlin, if we move to the next slide, I worked for United Way Worldwide for a little over 20 years. And I think during that time, I visited at least 100 United Ways for week-long consulting visits, received thousands and thousands of calls. And I found that there were United Ways that got so focused on the technical that they were never really successful. In fact, if anything, they would abandon the program only to have a couple of years later, whole new staff and volunteers restarting it. So the way that typically worked for those that were so focused on the technical, the first thing they did is recruited a committee, a plan giving committee, but they composed that committee of attorneys, CPAs, trust officers, financial planners, and these people had great technical expertise. Some may, but most didn't really have any connection with United Way. And so it took the first couple of meetings just to them to get acquainted to United Way and get some sense for how their work fit into the United Way system. And then they said, well, if we're going to get involved in a plan giving program, we're going to be talking about gifts and bringing in gifts. We need to create gift acceptance policies and procedures. And so this committee would wrestle with that. They could take months and months to develop that. There are policies and procedures available from United Way Worldwide. We have some examples of those, but typically it took months to do that. And then it would be presented to the board and there would be a lot of questions. So all of a sudden you have a brand new plan giving program that's almost a year into its existence, focusing on policies and the technical side. And then of course, once they've done that, they said, what is the purpose of a plan giving program? And that's always interesting to us. So Caitlin, I think if I'm remembering correctly, the next slide is a polling question that talks about what is the purpose of your plan giving program. And you'll need to go back to slide 3 for what part I'm dealing with, but if you could pull up that next polling question. So what is the purpose of your endowment fund? You don't have one. General operational support, cover overhead, still deciding other. General operational support seems to
Wow.
be the winner. The second is we don't have an endowment. Okay, thank you, Caitlin. So typically the NI ways that I worked with that went down this road, by now they're probably a year into their program. And so they have these first three, and then they say, okay, where is this endowment going to be held? Do we hold it ourselves? Do we put it in the community foundation? Do we create our own separate foundation? And I believe this is the last polling question. So I'll be interested to see what you all say. So Caitlin, if you could pull that up. Where is it held? It's held by United Way, Community Foundation, a combination of 1 and 2. This next question is a little redundant, but we don't have one or other. So this will be the last one. If you just take a moment and respond to that. Held by the United Way, held by the Community Foundation. We don't have an endowment, and other. So that's probably equally split.
Yeah.
And Monica, I think this is my experience that about a third of the United Ways hold their own endowment. About a third put it in a community foundation. A third do some other kind of thing with it. So this is pretty consistent with that. Okay, we can close this off. So my experience is by the time United Way is following this technical traditional approach, figure out the purpose, and they get into where the endowment is held, oftentimes they're 2 years, maybe even sometimes 3 years into this. And those that are having contentious relationships with their community foundation may never get past this point. So then a decision is made, well, everybody is going cyber, so we ought to create a website. Some try to do it on their own. Some try to go to a commercial vendor, and some have some sites that are free. And then finally, they say, well, before we go out and visit donors, we need to write a brochure. And the classic brochure that I can remember is a young child holding a candle, looking up to the sky, and on top it says, looking to the future. Very emotional and powerful. And then you open it up, and the content is about land giving vehicles, about charitable remainder trusts and lead trusts and gift annuities. So we have typical technical approach that sometimes takes 2 to 3 years out, but there's something missing. And if we go to the next slide, what is missing is we haven't engaged the board, and we haven't really got the CEO involved, and we haven't talked to donors. We haven't learned the donor's voice. And so what I'd like to do now is turn this over to Monica to talk a little bit about developing and sustaining robust CEO and board support. Monica?
Thank you, Ed. Well, I have good news for you. based on the information that you provided, you really don't have to be a plan giving specialist to have a successful plan giving program, but you have to know about your donor. And long-term plan giving success must start, continue, and end, and continue with the CEO and board leadership. Over the years, Ed and I have done so many of these studies and worked with so many of these communities. And I know that Dan may want to comment on some of this too, but I think it's important for the CEO to realize that, yes, the campaign is very important, but it can be a very successful supplement to sustain the community, not only sustain your campaign, but to look ahead at community needs. And that I think some of the CEOs go in it thinking it's a campaign. It is not a campaign. It's a donor relationship program. And it's a romance. And the pipeline is the systemic way to process the gifts. And there are experts out there that can do that. But it all starts with the CEO and the board. Accountability, quite frankly, CEOs are not typically measured for plan giving results, and the program must be measured and it must be performance based. And that is the board's job, because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And there needs to be accountability. Diversification, and we hear that a lot, it is really looking at other sources of revenue that yield greater potential. There is, and we all know it, there's decreasing value, cash with decreasing purchasing power. And there are many other tools that are available to a donor to provide you greater return on your dollars. And I think the most important thing, and one that is just not done enough, is to train and measure the CEO and the staff. Plan giving fundraising must be a systemic, there I go, Ed, and an integral part of the fundraising process. And it has to be institutionalized. Do you want to make any comments on that, Dan?
I think, when you look at your organization and you look at your donors and look at a number of them who have been giving for 10, 20, 30 years, you're seeing donors, if they've not been asked to make a commitment or to consider endowing their gift, which takes about 25 times their annual gift to endow it so that it keeps its purchasing power, you lose that gift if they have not been asked. And they're your most loyal, committed donors. And it's a wonderful opportunity to friendly visit with them and ask them if they have ever considered perpetuating their gift through making a gift to the endowment program. And I can see you have to have, the CEO has to be the visionary and the one that wants to make it happen in an organization. And the board needs to be brought into the discussion. And I think the CEO needs to bring it to the board. And the whole idea is not losing wonderful donors or giving them an opportunity to support your United Way in perpetuity. So between the chair of the board and the CEO, that's the core. And then you want to find a champion or two volunteers that embrace the idea of asking donors, loyal donors, to perpetuate their gift. So I'll just stop there and we can continue the discussion later.
Okay. And the point here is that the CEO does need to pay attention to the campaign. It's the lifeblood, but there are other more impactful revenue streams, and they need to focus on that. And it's really all about donor relationships. Now, Ed's going to talk a little about starting conversations, but I want to talk about the CEO and the board conversation for a moment. Dan just mentioned it. The most successful conversations obviously start with face-to-face with key stakeholders who have the interest, the capacity, and the commitment to your mission. Some of the CEOs, I know Dan's been very comfortable with this, and I and Ed am. Some of the CEOs talk about the need, but there are a few methods that we have used over the years that really help the CEO make their case to the board, and the key people making the ask starting a conversation with them. Dan's going to show you a chart in a minute, but we use the GIFT model, GIFTS model. If you were to take your Tocqueville results over the past 5 or 10 years, which demonstrates fluctuations, and you factor in, and what if they die? When they die, you lose that gift. That gift goes away. But as Dan mentioned, with a commitment of, it used to be 10, now it's 25 times their annual gift. It's perpetuated and stabilizes the campaign because that's coming back into the campaign or to the endowment. And a one-time gift at death, regardless of the amount, minimizes the impact of gift attrition to the campaign. So there's a lot to be said for endowing, gifts. The other thing is for increased diversification.
Excuse me, Monica.
Can you go to the next chart, please?
Yeah.
Caitlin?
Sure.
Okay, I covered gift attrition. The next one is to increase your diversification. If you take your United Way and just plot your revenue and then adjust it for the cost of living, you find some pretty significant information there. You got to keep up with the cost of living. And, Free Will recently released some statistical trends in philanthropy on 2024 and where it's going. And that cash gifts, including credit cards, are worth less each year. And the Federal Reserve predicts that checks are going to be obsolete by 2026. The other thing is the cash giving is down 6.4. So this puts additional momentum to think about increasing diversification. The other thing is, and you can show that and talk to that. The other thing,
excuse me, Caitlin, I think we need to go to the previous slide there.
Yeah, sorry, Caitlin. We'll go to attrition so Dan can talk to that, okay? Plan giving is directed to, plan giving that's directed to sustain the campaign or a new imperative minimalizes the drastic or unplanned occurrences. And an attrition chart that we talk about in, if you can plot your revenue and then your fluctuations, it supports, planned giving supports the campaign revenue. And, the other very obvious one, but we're not doing enough as a United Way system, are the tax advantage giving options. Donor advised funds payout rates were 27% in 2022. And in the past decade, they've experienced 5-time increase in total grant making. And these are just, if you refer to the Free Will presentation on the 2024 focus, your CEO has a lot of information that would be very helpful to a donor. I mean, stock gifts avoid capital gains. 10,000 boomers turn 70 every day, and the opportunity for qualified charitable distributions, IRAs or retirement accounts after the required age, benefit the donor and the United Way with the tax advantage and, of course, funds going to United Way. I think probably the most significant thing is the stability that it gives to the campaign and to looking at the future needs of the community, because that's one of the responsibilities of the CEO as well. Now, if you want to go back to that gift chart, Dan can explain to you the impact of the gift attrition from the Tokevilles.
Thank you, Monica. I think of a donor giving to the United Way, and you get your first Tocqueville gift or the first $1,000 or the first $100, and you look at year 2, if you get another one, you look down and you see the gain or the loss, whichever. If you get a new gift, it's on the first year, it's $10,000. Then if you get a second gift, new gift in year 2, you have 20,000. And if you put the two together, the total is 30,000. But if you look out over 10 years, what can happen, whether you gain or lose a particular gift, you can see the size and the cumulative impact in year 10. And that's what you want to do, is have a plan so that you do not lose a lot of gifts, whether it's $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 a year. And a real practical way to keep your giving is through the endowment program. And I have found that board members, many of them, understand the concept of what you're trying to do. If you're the CEO making the presentation, they have been talked to by other agencies or their college or church, and many of them have made commitments to endow their gifts for other organizations. So it's not new for a number of your board members, I'm sure. The real impetus is that you want to put together a program that can perpetuate annual giving. And I think what to think about it in terms of a friendly visiting with your key donors who are maybe 60 years of age and above, and maybe pick 10 or the top 10 or 20 donors and go out and visit with them with a volunteer or yourself maybe, and ask them, well, the purpose is to thank them for their generosity over 10, 20 or 30 years, whatever it might be, to listen to their story of generosity and why they're giving to United Way, and to ask them if they have ever thought about perpetuating or continuing that gift for generations to come, so that their good work can continue in the community. And then mention to them that it takes 25 times the annual gift to make that commitment, and ask them how they feel about something like that. If you have other donors that have been giving to your endowment or made gifts from their will or estate, you may have a list of previous donors that have made that kind of commitment. That's wonderful to share with them. But what you also need is like a pledge form or a commitment form, so that when they are ready to make a decision about a gift, that they have something to sign and you have some documentation to bring back to the office. I'll stop with that just in case, and take questions later maybe. I know we're covering a lot of stuff.
Well, Monica, I think it's my turn to jump in unless you have anything else to say.
Monica, you're on mute.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in then, Carol. And
No, I just want to mention that this concept of using this information that you see in front of you, the gift attrition, is a very simple way, and it makes a very real impact. And so, yes, but take a couple of charts with you. They've always been very, very successful, and they really pay attention when they start to see some of the numbers. But don't overdo it.
And
Okay.
the United Way Next volunteers have many of these charts. So if you're interested in trying to prepare some of this information for your board, we're happy to help. In terms of Monica and Dan both talked about board accountability. And what I really found is you have to measure plan giving programs on two axes. One is activity and the other is productivity. In the early stages, you're measuring it on activity, calls that you've made, that sort of thing. So we have some examples of that we can share with you. But through all of this, through all these conversations with the boards or the donors, so far we haven't mentioned charitable remainder trust at all. This is all about the mission of the United Way, how to support it. But through all of this, if we go to the next slide, and let me say one more thing. In business college, they said business 101 is that your best customer is your existing customer. Well, your best plan giving donor is a donor. And it's a lot easier to grow business from an existing donor than to try to bring in new donors. And I know there's a lot of conversation in the United Way system about broadening your base, but really feel that you have great opportunities with your existing donor base. Having said that, the greatest determinant for plan giving success is having face-to-face conversations with key donors. And if you want to know what your donors are thinking, if we go to the next slide, you ask them. So it's important to have plan giving conversations. Dan alluded to this earlier, but who are the people that you should be having conversations with? So if we go to the next slide, you really should start with your family, those people that love you the most. These are generally your long-term donors and your board and your staff, or former board and staff. These are your family. This is where you should start. Secondly, you should look at those people with whom you have the greatest influence. People that like you and trust you, that you can sit down and just have a conversation. Then, as we were looking at that gift attrition chart, whether you have Tocqueville Society or a Leadership Giving Society, you should take a look at that list and say, who are the people that we might lose in the next 10 years? They may pass away, or they may want to retire and leave the community. You still have great relationships with them. So you ought to look at those and put them on your list. And then finally, really look at those people that have the largest capacity, the people that have made the very largest gifts to you, and start having the conversation about how to perpetuate those gifts. Well, how do you do that? If we look at the next slide, what I've been fortunate to be able to do, and Dan has done this, Monica has done this, is we have, through United Way Next, done feasibility studies where we work with the local United Way, and we are given the opportunity to interview typically 20 to 30 of their donors. And it is amazing to me how much donors share if you simply ask. And there's an old adage that says, well, not many people are just going to want to jump up and give you a gift, but everybody wants to give you their opinion. But once they give you their opinion, they're in a much better position to make a gift. So we talked about these friendly visitor programs. And in Birmingham and in my experience, we call magic questions, where you sit down with the donor and you try to learn something from them. You ask them questions, and you don't have to list all 7 questions, but the one that seems to always resonate is just to simply say, how did you first get involved with United Way? Let them talk. When did you make your first gift? What is the most important role of United Way, and why is that so important? Looking out 10 to 20 years, what will be the greatest challenge facing United Way? What is the greatest long-term priority? How can you help? Have you ever considered making a planned gift or endowing your annual gift to United Way? Why and why not? This set of questions, this one donor content, is not about technical side of plan giving. It's the simplicity of having a donor share their experience. So our encouragement is to look at 2 audiences that you have to deal with. One is your board and your CEO, and making the internal case. Why is plan giving important to the mission of the United Way? And what benchmarks are you going to establish to be accountable and measurable and to present at each board meeting? And then the second is understanding the voice of your potential donors. Go out and meet with them, learn their experience, ask them if this is something they would ever consider. So Dan and Monica, I think this is the gist of our conversation. And I am reminded by a story, and I see some familiar faces that may have heard this from me before. But it's like the person that is walking down the wing of an airport, ready to get on the plane. And they look across the terminal and they see the most attractive person they've ever seen in their life. And they go running up to them and they say, "You're very attractive. Would you like to get married?" Well, we do that sometimes in plan giving by saying, "You're very elderly," or "You're very rich. Would you like to make a planned gift?" There has to be some romance there. That has to have them tell their story. And planned giving is probably about 80 to 85% listening and the rest talking. So with that said, I think I'll turn it over to the group and see if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Ed and Monica and Dan. This is great. Let's go ahead and open it up for questions. And we really encourage you to unmute and ask your own, but I did put in the chat if you're unsure what you want to put it in the chat. I'm happy to read the question as well. So we have a question in the chat from Arnold. How do you engage this donor? How do you engage the donor?
I can give you an example, and I'll ask Dan and Monica as well. I think it's really about sitting down with them and having them tell their United Way story.
Yeah.
And I think a real key question is, how did you get involved with United Way? And I've heard people say, well, I was hired brand new by a bank, and my boss told me I was going to be a loan executive, and I didn't know a thing about United Way. And then I got involved, and I was on a campaign, and I just stayed involved, and I eventually got involved in the board. some fascinating stories. But I think probably just simply saying to them, how did you get involved? And, getting the appointment is a trickier part, I think, but generally, I think you can say, you've been calling them up and say, you've been such a loyal donor. I'd really like to know more about your story. How did you get involved? And then like share your thoughts about a direction we're taking with United Way. Could I come by and meet with you or take you out for a cup of coffee? Dan, Monica, any thoughts how you might answer that?
I think I would add it that I wanted to thank them for their long history of giving to the United Way, and would love to hear their story of how they got started and what advice or they have maybe for us at this point, and just let them talk. And I would say when you go back to the office, I would make notes about that visit on your computer system so that you remember if you're meeting with them a second time or a third time or a fourth time, which I think plan giving is a process because they're thinking through what you've shared, making good notes and putting them in your computer system is very helpful for not only yourself, maybe, or another volunteer, but years in the future when other staff people maybe are carrying on the work that you started, to be able to go back to the notes. It's very helpful to do that.
Dan, were you the one who was telling a story about you were visiting a former campaign chair and they pulled out this yellowed file folder from a campaign many years ago? Was that your story or is that from somebody else?
It must be someone else.
I heard the story of someone who had visited a former campaign chair, was retired for a long time, and he pulled out the folder and he could tell you everybody who gave, but more importantly, he could tell you everybody who didn't give. And it was one of the that period was one of the highlights of his life. And I know when I have done that, sadly, many of them say, this is the first time someone from United Way has ever visited me. It's been years. They loved United Way. They gave a big part of their life, and they like to have the attention from United Way. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you. And taking just a little time to think who those people are, I think that gives you a golden opportunity to engage those people. Does that answer your question?
I think that's a great answer. I put some notes. Arnold said yes. I put some notes in the chat for others who may be listening later, or for those of you who were wanting those. I wanted to just make a comment that something that really resonated with me at the beginning is when you talked about the technical piece of this work and that we sometimes overcomplicate it. And it reminded me of a story, and it's one that I've shared before with our planned giving office hours, but something that I just thought others on the call might benefit from hearing. And this was in reference to overcomplicating things. So I had worked very hard to build solid relationships with many of our top donors, but had never had the planned giving conversation. And it wasn't until we were in the midst of the pandemic, and it was an evening in December. I'm not even sure when this was, but I remember exactly where I was seated, and my phone rang, and it was one of our top donors who was calling me back after I had left him a message thanking them, not only him for his $10,000 Tocqueville gift, but their United for their company in running a campaign again and raising more money in the pandemic than they had raised the year prior. And just how grateful we were as a local United Way that they continued that support. And the conversation really, we had an hour-long conversation, and I shared in that conversation that a donor had recently passed. And it was a $100 supporter. And in the end, this woman had left a gift of $48,000, and it was 2 IRAs, and our United Way was the beneficiary. And we had no idea this gift was coming. And I just mentioned the story with this particular donor, and he stopped me and said, Carol, I never thought about leaving a gift at the end of my life. The next time I have a board meeting with my family foundation, I'm going to recommend that we set that up now so that there's a guaranteed gift when I'm no longer here. So I didn't even have to say anything, but because I had a relationship and it was just a normal conversation, very casual, it just worked out. Now, I will never know because I'm no longer at that United Way if the gift comes to fruition, but it absolutely can be about just taking that relationship to another level. And when I say that, it's about the intimacy piece that Monica referenced at the beginning, and romancing these people that like they become your family and your friends. So they're willing to share this, but we have to be willing to ask. So anyways, I just wanted to share that as just initial thoughts to that. We were making it very like, oh, we don't really know what to do for planned giving. And here in just one conversation, there was a pretty generous offer for a guaranteed gift. So I see in the chat, Regina made a comment, so I want to read that out real quick. Hello. Do many donors stipulate which programs they want their funds to impact or continue?
My experience is the majority make it unrestricted. There are some that will stipulate, but I think the vast majority. Monica, Dan, what is your experience?
Mine is all the gifts that in Birmingham were unrestricted. We just did not encourage designations at all. Didn't mention designate. It was to perpetuate their giving to United Way. And it's worked very well, just taking that approach.
I wanted to key off something Carol said, and I think you all have experienced this, but you open up paper, you go on the web, you look at the obituaries and see one of your long-term donors who's passed away. And you read their obituary, and throughout that obituary, there are references to United Way. They were the past campaign chair. They were the board chair. They were involved in many aspects of United Way. In fact, many times, United Way is the only charity mentioned. And then at the end, it says, in lieu of flowers, send your gifts to the Buttered Corn Society or something. Shame on us. We know who those people are. It's not about having a planned giving program. It's about having a planned giving conversation with the people that love you the most, and you know who they are.
I want to
just from a marketing standpoint or a communication standpoint with your donors, on all your materials, ask them, please you include United Way in your will or estate plan and tell us when you do. That's a simple way to just start getting the message out on the agendas of your meetings, your annual report, your pledge forms. Just put that simple message in everything and mention it at your board meetings and executive committee and other committees. Just please consider including United Way in your will or estate plan and tell us when you do. And that's things can happen from just that approach. I know. Yeah, go ahead, Monica.
I'm sorry, just to supplement on what you're saying, Dan. It's very important that once you get the gift and you have the relationship, that you have a touch points with your donors. And I know at AARP as a donor relation manager, I had 6 touch points each year with the plan giving donors, whether it was a Thanksgiving card or a call on their birthday, just to let them know and to thank them again.
Right, that's wonderful. I know we have about 2 minutes left, and I want to say thanks to you, Monica and Ed, for your homework and your work in your careers for promoting the mission of United Way worldwide, and for your time here today making this presentation and the offer of your availability to help any of the participants here with additional information. So thank you both so much. I want to thank those who took the time from busy schedules to be with us, and know that we are here for you. United Way Next, contact Carol if we can be of advisors to you, help you get started, solve a question. There's quite a number of us happy to help. I want to thank Caitlin for helping us get organized for this, and Carol for her work in leading United Way Next. Carol, I'll turn it back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Monica and Ed. It was a great session. I went ahead and put in the chat my email address. So if you have questions or you want additional resources, feel free to send me an email. Let me know what you're looking for. There's a ton of information on United Way online that is helpful for planned giving and those types of resources. I can certainly send out directly if you'd like. And if there's a need for a trusted advisor and a mentor or somebody that you just want to talk with about what you learned today or other aspects of this this work, please reach out to me, because I'm happy to make introduction to one of our planned giving volunteers. And those names are listed on our website at unitedwaynext.org under the planned giving faculty. So you can just take a look there to see who the people are that are doing the work. So I'm grateful for this time today. We do have a session coming up in July that is going to be led by Wes Wicker, and it's titled How to Lead a Planned Giving Program When You Don't Have a Planned Giving Officer. So I suspect there will be some similarities to that program as in today, but some of the basics to get you all started on this journey. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next United Way Next event. So have a great summer, everybody. And thanks again to Monica, Ed, and Dan, and Caitlin for all your help today.